Runescape Classic is the best game. The 3-hit combat. The winner takes it all PVP. Basically inventing Battle Royale before it was popular. Pre-rendered 2.5D graphics. Iconic world. Chill gameplay with mouse only. I had dreamt of RuneScape Classic ever since I fell in love with it back in 2001. I thought that especially the PvP in the game was unlike anything else. When RuneScape 2 came out, it quickly overtook the franchise and Classic started to wither away. And then they dared to claim the title of Old School RuneScape. Now whenever I talk about RuneScape Classic, people immediately think I'm talking about Old School RuneScape. That makes me mad and sad. Because what's more old school than the older version of the game? RuneScape 2 would be nothing without the visionary work of the first game. The original combat was so much more fun and exciting. The community and design were full of soul. And for that reason, it's time for revenge. Justice for RuneScape Classic! But there was a big problem. There is no way I'm going to make a MMORPG alone in any reasonable time period. It's a known meme for starting developers to start working on a huge project, and I didn't want to be that guy. So I made a plan. I had been watching Pirate Software and Thor for a while. I took his advice and created a game design document. I poured most of my ideas into black and white, and it really helped me make the ideas reality. Before that, the ideas were perfect in my head, but the ideas were just ideas. Kinda hazy and coated with vagueness. I learned that by writing things down and talking about them to others suddenly brings them to life. And this was one of my philosophies going into the project. Write and plan ahead. I had multiple layers of plan in my head before going into the project. How would I handle the business side, marketing, playtesting, and actual development? The plan was I would start live streaming my process just like Pirate Software. Se toimii! Pystykö mä liikkuu? En. Yes! Siinä! Kiitor in your face! Not my face, in your face! I thought it made perfect sense. By streaming, I'm doing the development, but also marketing at the same time. And when I face trouble, I might have some help from the chat. And in addition, I would have some documentation of the project. I would create a work week-like schedule where I stream it all. Well, did the plan work? I'll tell you a little later in the video. My plan for building the game was following. First, make a tech demo. Programmer art, bare functionalities, inspired by RuneScape Classic. Take the best part of RuneScape Classic and remake it. Wilderness with PvP, loot and combat. Make it multiplayer and online. Schedule 1.5 months. Then, if I'm still laid off, make a marketable demo. Unique art style, locked functionalities, make it our own, more polish, well-rounded experience, and schedule until Christmas. Now that I had a plan, it was time to start building. I put on my live stream, and I was an open book. I spoke about my insecurities. For example, that I was not extremely experienced. I've been employed at a Unity game studio for the past 2 years as a programmer, but that's pretty much it. I hadn't built any significant projects from scratch, and especially not multiplayer ones. Then there's the big P, procrastination. I had noticed from myself over the past decade that I have a problem of procrastination. In fact, I'm so good at procrastination that I deserve another prefix. I'm a pro-procrastinator. Every time I would face a challenge I didn't immediately know how to solve, I would both consciously and subconsciously start to self-sabotage the project by not even starting or doing something that gave me instant gratification. Hey, that's how I failed my uni studies. By going into this project, I would have to face numerous challenges that I didn't know how to solve right away. And that's okay. I need to become this problem-solving machine that breaks everything down into smaller pieces and that anything is solvable. And it actually worked. I wasn't that afraid of failing or not knowing everything. I just started doing, and when I faced a challenge, I would immediately open up Paint and start writing down what I wanted to do. This method proved to be amazing for my brain. By the way, before we get technical, I want to let you know that this video is not supposed to be a devlog. If you want to know how I actually remade RuneScape Classic PVP, let me know down in the comments. Or if you want devlogs, I'm open to doing monthly videos. The purpose of this video is to kind of be an overview of how I started my solo dev journey and how the experience was. And to also reach RuneScape enjoyers and to do advertisement. Alright, so I needed multiplayer solutions. At first I started working with photon fusion, which is something I've used before. But after a week of immense trouble, I scrapped the whole framework. I didn't want server-sided physics into the game or anything like that, which is basically the whole point of photon fusion. It just didn't make any sense, and the guys at Photon Discord agreed with me. That's when I found out about Unity's own netcode for game objects. It was very quick to set up, and I got back where I was in no time. I got my asset store cat spawning into the scene, and I was on top of the world. I created a custom character controller to register mouse clicks, and by adding Unity's AI nav mesh feature, I had my cat following the mouse. At first, the nav mesh agent was super floaty and it didn't feel anything like the character in RuneScape. By tweaking the settings and removing colliders, I had a pretty good replication of how it felt back in the days. Except that it wasn't nearly as laggy. Now that I had movement, I could work on a simple scene. In my game design document, I wrote down the inspirations for my game. In addition to RuneScape Classic, I also had a wonderful survival game named Don't Starve. I love the crap out of Don't Starve, and big part of why is the art style and the 2.5D graphics. There's just something magical and timeless about the art style, so I chose to go with that. And in case you didn't already know, 2.5D can mean many things. But in my case, it is 2D paper-like assets in a 3D world. In Unity, this is fairly simple to implement. You drag and drop sprites into the scene, and they become 3D objects. Now, since I was working with 2D sprites essentially, there were a lot of challenges I didn't know beforehand. And I'll get to that later on. At this point, I put on some of my asset store assets into the scene to create this cage kind of arena. The walls are actually staircases, but I think it was good enough for the tech demo. I added some tile texture into my ground plane and it looked super stupid. I didn't really understand how tile sets work and if they can be used on 3D planes. And to this date, I still don't really get it. I added a Cinemachine third-person camera for the player and set the camera projection type into orthographic to really sell the RuneScape Classic. I experimented with RPC calls to get a gate network to open and close. Very nice, very demure. I am a programmer and I make programmer art. And I'm also not a perfectionist, which means that I'm getting stuff done quick. I chose to start working with a sprite, which turned out to be a wonderful choice. It's an absolute gem of a software, and I very quickly became semi-comfortable drawing icons, assets, and even animations into my game. And yes, since I used sprites as characters, I had to make some tough calls on how to animate and handle character rotation in the game. Now, if you check how RuneScape Classic did it, the characters were sprites and the sprites were changed according to the angle of the camera where the character was going. So in reality, it's not really rotating the character game object at any given point, but it only changes the sprite in relation to these different parameters. I suppose RuneScape Classic actually rigged the characters to handle animations and equipment, which I did not do for this project. All of my animations are done separately for each weapon in the game, which is obviously not very scalable. So this is something we're gonna do different in the future. I chose not to do any sound effects or music for the tech demo. My philosophy towards audio was that once you start adding music and sound effects, you gotta go all in. And like in RuneScape Classic, there were basically no sounds. Now that I had character and some items, I had to embark on the biggest challenge so far: combat. I had to figure out a bunch of things to get combat working in a similar fashion than in RuneScape Classic. So this is the basic logic for combat. I'm actually pretty proud how it turned out. The combat feels fairly similar to its inspiration. The 3-hit combat was definitely there, players could flee. Although sometimes things got buggy. And we got some funny moments. Now that I had the basic combat working, it was time for the actual loot. I created a simple inventory that bears close resemblance to RuneScape Classic. All loot dropping and picking up is handled by the server, which was a constant head scratcher. I had to get over the taught ways of doing things locally. If I wanted my game to be resistant to cheating, I had to have the server handle all the crucial logic of loot and item usage. After a week or so, I had the core features of loot worked out. At this point, I worked on bringing NPCs into the scene so that I could effectively test out the combat and dropping loot. The NPCs would drop their inventory to the ground and player could pick them up by clicking on them. Big shout out to my boys in the Twitch chat for helping me out. Roughly after a month of working on my game, it was time to start putting together a build that would be tested with some of my viewers on Twitch. I added some small features to make it more enjoyable, more bots for players to farm loot, a dragon sword that was laying outside the arena for someone reaching over 10 kills, tweaked the numbers here and there to make combat more exciting, and finally, a very basic kill count on top of the player to see who's doing well and who's not. I couldn't get Unity's multiplayer and matchmake to work seamlessly, so I took the easiest route. I created a test allocation from Unity's game hosting and shared the server IP and port addresses. We tried to join and nothing. Nothing happened. No, joining doesn't do anything. What's happening? I had made a last-minute change while live streaming, pushing the change into Unity's game hosting service, and it had a bug. It was a nightmare. There was a null-ref error on the logs and I was sweating my head off. So I postponed the playtest session another 15 minutes and pushed another build with the fix, and... moment of truth. I'm in! Vatsky is already here! Vatsky is already here! We are in, boys! Vida Lush is in! Oh, we don't actually know if it's... Look at that! We have people! You beautiful people! Welcome! It worked! We had like 8 players join. You could see players moving correctly. The chat was working. Although people immediately started abusing the text mesh pros rich text to do whatever is happening here. Thanks, guys. We had a blast. I laughed my butt off because we were having so much fun. Now, what were the key takeaways from the playtest? Well, we had some major bugs and a lot of minor ones. The biggest bug was that if you fleed combat against an NPC, the NPC got stuck in the combat indefinitely. So this meant that soon all of the bots were stuck and you couldn't farm any more loot. Oopsies. I would say that for the first playtest session, the PvP worked fairly well. Sure, there were hiccups, but combat was synced properly and it felt fairly responsive. Feedback from the clicks were a little off. The doors didn't close and my ground loot was nowhere to be seen. But overall, I would give the playtest session a 3 out of 5 stars. Not bad for my very first multiplayer game with dedicated server. And that leads to this moment right now. Over the course of 2 months, I built a fan version of RuneScape Classic's PVP and somewhat succeeded in it. I have a working prototype, but this is not the end point. I had made a plan and it was time to review it. Did streaming help my development process? I would say absolutely. I've been streaming on and off ever since 2017, which means that I'm pretty good at it. By creating a workweek schedule, going live really helped me push myself to start developing and not dwell in procrastination. I mean, I still procrastinated, even when I was live by talking about, everything, but it was like 90% better. And the thrill of getting new followers and networking on Twitch really gives everything an extra hit of dopamine. And this way I'm also networking with other developers, which is always smart. The only downside of my plan was that live streaming has taken a toll on my voice, and it can be a struggle sometimes. Some of the fellow developers can be, where they lack charisma and kindness, they make up in bluntness and how about you do it my way? And of course a lot of friendly and not so friendly banter. But I would still say that these issues were minor. Next up, making it our own. I present you an AI generated image of Shadows of Tuonela. We will no longer speak of Runescape Classic for legal and other obvious reasons, and we will start building our own PvP multiplayer game with dueling in its core, looting and crafting coming as close seconds. I will continue streaming on my Twitch channel, where we will create a new plan for Shadows of Tuonela, make our own pixel art, and program everything from scratch. And guess what? You are invited. Hit that follow button. I'm dying to hear what your thoughts are on the game and on the project. Until next time.